this podcast, we will be looking at storytellers, stories, and the reasons that oral storytelling is important in our world today. You would think with all the technology we have available that stories do not have a place anymore, but they are needed more than ever. For in storytelling is where we find truth, we find reality, and we find the heart of what it is to be human. Welcome to the heart of storytelling. My name is Alyssa Curtain, and let's go on an adventure. Are you in for a treat this week? This week, Canadian storyteller Brian Walsh shares his experience telling Irish myths and stories in Canada, as well as exploring themes in landscape, queer stories. We cover lots of great content, including a very special story told early in the interview. If you're ready, let's listen to the interview with Brian. Welcome to this week's podcast. Today we're speaking with Brian Walsh, who is in Toronto in Canada. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So tell me about how you got your start in storytelling. What sort of stories are you involved in?
Yeah, I think that stories have always been a really important part of my life. I grew up on military bases, so that sort of quest for history, for home, for belonging, uh, that was sort of those pieces were missing, and so I had to find those. But at the same time, I was exposed to all sorts of wonderful and interesting places that all had their own stories. So it was that seeking for roots, but also noticing how wonderful the world is, both at the human level and at the natural level. I think was really important for me. I spent some of my formative years up in northern Alberta, so way north of Edmonton. So it was quite normal to have northern lights for most of the winter, and then in the summertime, the street lights wouldn't turn on till like 11 at night. So a very different environment than further south here. Toronto is almost as far south as you can go in Canada. But yeah, I was always interested in story and how they related to nature, and interested in story and how they relate to belonging. So those were my two really big themes for me. And when I started a Celtic Studies program in Toronto in the late 80s, it was sort of an easier way to have access to all the things I'd been hunting around for as a teenager. So I really appreciated that. But I didn't get my sort of professional start until 2012. That's when I took it from a private endeavor into more of a public endeavor. And I've been doing it ever since, and I've been really enjoying it.
So you're a professional storyteller now?
Yes. It's
Yeah.
not my sole gig, but it's something that I spend a fair amount of time with.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right now, because it's just the beginning of November, I finished one of my busy seasons. Everyone's looking for a storyteller in October for spooky season.
They
And there
are.
are so many good Irish folk tales and myths that are related to Samhain and to Halloween and that time of year that there was no shortage of material. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, I've got lots of questions. So the growing up on military bases, I mean, that's I know someone who works on military bases, so I'm just sort of like I'm fascinated by this idea of children moving in different places all the time and how that must be to grow up like that.
Yeah, well, I didn't know any different. So I think that military bases are really interesting for kids in that on one level, it's like a gated community. But on another level, it's sort of closer to a blue collar community.
Mm.
So it shared some of the benefits of each of those. Uh, One of the things I noticed is that the further a base is from civilization, the better it is for the kids. Because there was a base here in downtown Toronto forever. They had no amenities because all the amenities were just outside the gate, right? But if you're out in the woods, if you're in the middle of the far north, all your amenities need to be inside the gate. So growing up, we had a movie theater, bowling alley, archery range, and swimming pool, and a little mall, and like all the things that a child could want. And your parents could just leave you free range, right? It was also the early 80s when we used to do that. So so yeah, being on a base is great when you're young. And yeah, the you learn to say hello and goodbye an awful lot, because if you're not moving, then maybe your best friend is, because everyone's moving every 4 years, but not on the same schedule. So there's a
Mm.
constant turnover. Um, and it gives you a chance, or gave me a chance, to sort of reinvent myself once in a while. You know, I can't imagine growing up in civilian life where your identity, like you did something stupid in grade 6 and bam, you're living with that till you're 80. That sounds horrifying.
Certainly does. Certainly does. So I imagine that the places that you've gone, you collected stories, or was that something that happened later on?
Something that happened later on.
Mm,
Yeah, all of the stories that I had a strong interest in were the Irish stories and mythic stories.
mm,
Stories of place, well, sort of for me, they at the time they were like imaginary places in some ways, places I'd never been, but they still related easily enough to the land I was on, right? And so when as human beings, especially in the northern hemisphere with northern stories, you know, that the sky is the same. Some of the little weeds that grow in the under your feet are the same. Um, some of the rhythms of the weather, well, some are the same and some are like really different. Like in Ireland, plowing season is early in the year when even Toronto is still under a fair amount of snow, or it just is not ready yet, even if there's no snow. So I think that how we adapt the stories,
mm,
you know, like the Festival of Bridget or Imullig in Ireland is the beginning of spring. Here it's the bright spot in the darkness of winter.
mm,
You're just noticing that the days are getting longer and that sort of thing. So the land I was relating to with like a given river story was the river nearest me rather
mm.
than something else. Yeah.
Yeah. So how did you know that it was the Irish and Celtic tales that you wanted to tell?
Uh, it was the one of the stories from my background.
Yeah.
My background is Irish and Scottish and Acadian French.
Mm,
But it was the Irish stories that hooked me for some reason.
mm,
Um, they just had such an epic swath sort of across this huge arc of time, um, and the way the sort of mythic history was put together. Even though that's a very medieval construction, I still find it really appealing. And I try and imagine what it would have been like in their original form, which is beyond us. But even in their medieval form, I find them just amazing.
Do you have a favorite? A favorite?
Oh, yeah, that's tricky. Uh, I think I've got a few favorites. Um, One of them is the Birth of Lou, and that's one that I've got prepared for today because we're moving into the winter season. But I also love Niall and the Hag, or The Adventures of the Sons of Yochi McMurden, which is where young uh, Niall, who's about to be king, meets Sovereignty in the woods. And first she appears as a terrible hag. Uh, all his brothers have gone to try and get water one at a time. So they're on like a hunting trip, and they all come back and they're like, "Nope, nope, we're not that thirsty." And then finally he goes. He's the fifth one, the youngest, and he sees this terrible hag, and she asks for a kiss to get water, and he's like, well, not only will I kiss you, I will lie with you. And then he's just horrified at what he said, and as he sort of wraps his arms around her and gives her the first kiss with his eyes tightly closed, he realizes that she's beautiful now. And so the theme of that story is uh, now you have seen me, at first wolfish and terrifying, and in the end, I am good and kind to all. I am sovereignty. And it's just like,
Mm.
there's something amazing about that.
Oh, that story has many versions, doesn't it? It's in
Does.
Scéalta, and it's a great story. Would you like to share your story now?
Sure. Yeah, we can
Yeah.
do that. Okay. So this is my version of the Birth of Lugh, and it's a compilation of a variety of versions. In the second Battle of Moytirid, it just gets one line. It just gets a little throwaway line that's not terribly interesting. But in the folk culture, it blossomed into something much bigger. Fado, fado, nor a bhí tuad idanen, na ddítha iad féin in agoni and Aaron. Long, long ago, when the Tuatha Dé Danann, the gods themselves, lived in Ireland, Ireland belonged to the gods. Well, almost. You see, alongside the Tuatha Dé, that tribe of shining gods who descended from starry heaven, the Fomor were never far away. A terrible tribe that ascended from the abyss itself. Now, among those Fomor was a king named Balor, and Balor was terrible to behold, but more terrible still if he beheld you. One of his eyes was so full of poison, anyone he looked at with it would die. And it was so big and so swollen that it took 4 men with hooks and chains to lift it. He had a wife named Cachleen of the Crooked Tooth. And she was called that because she had one tooth that was so long she could use it as a cane. They were a hard and terrible couple. But among their offspring was one as fair as they were foul. Her name was Enya, which means kernel or seed, and she was kind and gentle, beautiful and wise. But when she was born, a prophecy came, either through Cachleen or through one of Balor's druids, that should his daughter ever have a child, that child would be a son, and that child would be the death of him. And so Balor took Enya up to an island in the ocean in the north of the world, where he built a tower of glass and a crystal bower. And in that crystal bower, he placed Enya with only her handmaidens to keep her company. And that would have been the end of it. That would have been the end of it, except it came to pass that Balor stole a magic cow from the Tuatha Dé Danann, the glass goblin. She was an amazing beast that made green any pasture she entered and was never without milk. Well, the loss of such an amazing beast was soon noticed by the gods, so he needed a place to hide it. So he hid it in Enya's crystal bower on the top of that tower of glass on that island in the north of the world. Well, the gods, they looked everywhere, and they enlisted Cian as the primary searcher. Cian, whose name means enduring. He searched in the north and in the south, in the east and in the west of Ireland. He searched all along the edges and in the middle, and he could not find that cow, no matter how hard he tried. Until one day, Birog came to him. Birog was a druidess, Birog of the mountain. And she found Cian and said, I know where the cow is. I know where the cow is, and I have a plan to get you there. And with that, she reached into one of her bags and she pulled out a dress. She held the dress up to Cian's shoulders, and even though he was a strong and mighty warrior, this was Birog of the mountain. The dress would fit fine. She did his hair in a womanly style. She pinched his cheeks and stained his lips so that they could get close to the island. And then, raising her magic wand, she wafted them away on a druidic wind. When they reached the island, now called Tory Island for the tower that was there, their feet touched the Scéalaí beach, and they started walking toward that tower. There were guardsmen along the beach, and they saw 2 women approaching. They saw 2 women approaching until one of them looked over and thought, hey, that one on the left looks a little bit, and with that, Birog waved her wand and put all of the guards under a druidic sleep. They wended their way amongst the guards, and Cian climbed up the tower of glass and into the crystal bower. Well, Cian found the cow, but that's not all he found. He and Enya locked eyes on each other. Oh, she was the most beautiful woman that he had ever seen. And he tried to pull his way out of his disguise, and as he rushed toward her, her handmaidens blocked the path. Enya looked over the shoulders of her handmaidens to see this man. She hadn't seen a man before, but this seemed like a good one. And then the handmaidens looked at him, half in and half out of Birog's dress. And one stepped forward. We handmaidens are here to protect our mistress from the advances of men. But we too have been in the Tower of Glass for a very, very long time. If you can sleep with each of us in turn, you may, after a time, sleep with our mistress. Now, some stories say she had 9 handmaidens, and some stories say she had 12. And there's one version that says that Enya had 900 handmaidens. But Cian was indeed enduring. And so, after a time, he and Enya were able to lie together. And after a little more time, Cian was able to slip out of that tower of glass with Glasgoblin, the magic cow. Well, they wended their way amongst the sleeping guards, and Birog wafted them away on a druidic wind, herself, Cian, and the cow. When Balor found out that the cow was missing, he was furious. But not nearly as furious as he was a few months later when he realized that Enya and all of her handmaidens were all quite pregnant. Storms raged through the north of the world. The sea churned and the clouds cracked with thunder. And eventually, in the coldest, darkest time of the year, all of them began to give birth at once. Well, as each child was born wet and shining into the world, Balor had soldiers collect them and put them in sheets. And those sheets each had a bundle of babies. And each bundle of babies was put in a coracle, and those coracles were rowed out to a whirlpool deep in the ocean. But as the last bundle of babies was put into the boat, a little hand reached out between the folds and undid the pin, and one child slipped out and hid himself among the rocks. To this day on Tory Island, that place is called Port Nadelig, the haven of the pin. And as the last boat rowed out into the cold, dark Atlantic, as all of the bundles of babies were thrown into the cold, dark sea, Birog was waiting on the beach. With one hand, she picked up the child that had hidden itself among the rocks, and with the other, she waved her magic wand and sang a song over the sea. And suddenly, to those babies, the sea was not cold, but warm. And the sea was not dark, but they could see each other as they transformed into seals. Seals whose descendants can still be found in the north of the world. Now, Birog again wafted the child away to Ireland, where she gave the child to Cian. And Cian, it was said, gave the child to Telcha, whose name means great land, for she was neither Fomor nor Tuatha. She was of the Firbolg, the people of the earth. And she raised him and taught him and got him a multitude of mentors, that he could be equally skilled in all arts and ready for his destiny. So it was that the child of promise was born. So it was that the child of promise grew up, hidden from the world. But this story is part of a much greater story, where the child returns, now named Lugh. He kills his grandfather Balor and uses Balor's head and eye to drive the Fomor out of the land forever. But that is a story for another time. May all who have heard this story prosper from its telling.
Oh, that's so good. Thank you so much. I mean, my surname is Irish. I've never been to Ireland. I've never, it's so far back in our family line, like they were really early arrivals to Australia, um, in the 1800s. And I don't know anything about it. I mean, I told the Morrigan, which is a Celtic, myth when I was at Emerson, but to hear Irish tale, it just sort of, I guess, and for a lot of us, we don't have stories of the place that we live, the stories of, because we're all descendants of migrants, so we don't have the stories of our ancestors because they came and then they just disappeared when they came, or they got morphed into new things. So it's so wonderful to hear that. So thank you so much for sharing that story. I thought that was great, really, really great. So how do people receive the Irish tales in Canada? How does it come across?
I think it's received really well. For a lot of the more recent immigrants, the fact that, or even for other people, the fact that I try and put a bit of the language in there. I put in a couple of fuckle, a couple of
Yes,
words,
I heard. Yeah, that was great.
and and that gives it sort of it gives it an interesting vibe, for lack of a better word. Uh, and I'm always nervous. Like one of my recent tellings was at the Celtic Studies department at U of T, and there were Irish speakers in the room. And I'm like, oh, because sometimes I'm the only person who has a little bit of Irish. And so, if it sounds good, I know I can get away with it, right? Uh, but the goal for me isn't to get away with it. It's to have some depth. And as a lifelong learner, I think that I really appreciate putting it in there, and people like receiving it. There's something
Mm,
magical about it.
mm,
Uh, and the stories themselves, I think people will relate it to what they know.
mm,
So the story of Bowen and the river where she becomes all the waters of the world. Well,
mm,
all the waters of the world include the waters here.
mm,
Um, I cross a river to go to work, and it's about the size of the Boyne. I was there
mm,
in uh, summer of 2022 for the first time. I went to Ireland, um, and I'm used to sort of Canadian-sized rivers, and so it was a little bit different to see the scale shift, but also there's just such a depth of time, and
mm,
so there's that sort of difference. Uh, but I think that we relate it to the world we know,
mm,
and I think that stories are very kind in that they help us relate to the land we're on.
mm,
As long as it's not too radically different. I'm sure Egyptian stories, like desert stories, that might be trickier. But if you're in Arizona,
mm,
then maybe that makes like, or parts of Australia, like maybe those
mm,
stories would resonate in a good way. So I don't think that they're bound to place,
mm,
um, even though they're about place. They're so intimately they're about place, but they're not bound to it because
mm,
the same rules apply, across the world.
mm. Did you find going to Ireland that this stories came up? Like I went to Scotland and it was like I could see the creatures that would come from the land. It was, you could see the stories coming from that. Did you have an experience in Ireland where oh, this is where this story came from, and it made a bit more sense because you could see the landscape in your head as well?
Um, yes and no. Yes and no. I had seen so many pictures and I was kind of steeped in a particular way that the feeling was more like, oh, I'm finally here. And it was kind of as expected, which was nice. So my intuition wasn't too far off, but I
Mm,
especially appreciated my time at Newgrange, where the stories for Bowen and Angus were topmost in my mind. or at Uisneach, the center, the geographical center of Ireland, where there's this huge stone that being with that stone and being able to walk around it. I walked around it saying uh, the song of Avergan. I am wind on sea, I am ocean wave, I am roar of sea. I had that poem in my mind as I had a chance to circumambulate this stone, and it really felt. It sort of defies words a bit. It felt good. It felt deep, um, but it didn't feel strange.
Mm.
I think I had been story prepped. I was ready.
Ready to see leprechauns or anything coming out. Oh, that's so good. Yeah. So when you choose a story, or does a story choose you? And do you stay within the framework of the Irish myth, or do you move in and out of that?
Yeah, it goes both ways. Sometimes I feel like a story has chosen me and it's resonating with a certain piece in my life. For example, the coming of the sons of Mill was a really important story. It's part of the Laur Gavala era, but they when human beings first come to Ireland, they have to try and land twice, and they have sort of combat with the gods. They fight the gods twice to stay, and they have two parleys to decide, how they're going to divide the land. And as a younger person, or even now, but as a younger person, the reminder that you have to take more than one go at something. Anything worthwhile has some struggle, some resistance.
Mm.
In the story, humans beat the gods, but I mean, just by the nature of being a god, I mean, clearly they must have allowed it to happen, right? But it wasn't just a gimme, like you're going to work for this, uh, and so that kind of orientation to effort, um, but also to contract. Like when Avergan speaks with the three goddesses, Banba, Fotla, and then Era, he makes deals with them, and in the end, he's making a deal with the Dagda. We have to have good relations
Mm.
with the powers that be, and good relations with each other, and that was all in that story. So that one sort of lived with me really brightly for years and years, and the poems are still really important to me.
Mm.
Um, it surprises an audience too when you're telling a story and then suddenly you break out into this really long riff of poetic expression and then just go back to the story. um, so that can be a lot of fun. um, I don't think I answered your question. Oh, do they choose me? So
Yeah.
sometimes like that one, and other times, like if I'm pulling together a set for a certain season, there'll be stories I love already, but then there are others that I should do something with this. And so yeah, sometimes they arrive and sometimes we have to court them a little bit. Um, that's okay. Some
Yeah.
stories just rush in and others play hard to get. And
Yeah.
and that's okay
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. Or I have a couple of stories that I'd like to work on, but I don't think I'm the storyteller I need to be to work on that yet. So they're down the track. I'm not ready for them. So they're there,
Mm.
but not ready for now. And so with your storytelling, where do you perform? What sort of storytelling do you do?
Yeah, so mostly performance telling.
Mm.
And again, it's always myth and folk tale, mostly Irish stories. I also like to do, or I'm just starting to work on some queer stories. But I've put some really fussy parameters around it. I'm not looking to queer a folk tale. I'm looking for a queer folk tale, like one that
Mm. Yeah.
starts off that way. I don't need to change something
Mm.
to sort of force this in. I want it to already be there.
Mm.
And I've got a list of about 20 so far that I'm completely, like I've told one of them, I'm unversed, I am unready, it's a future project. But
Well, yeah. And
the,
there are some good queer stories out there.
yeah, the
Yeah.
version of that I know of is Tiresias, the Greek
Ah,
prophet.
yeah.
Yeah. And so that's an amazing story. Yeah, that's the sort of thing I'm looking for this
Yeah.
set.
Yeah.
And it's tricky because when the folklore motif indexes were being pulled together, same-sex relations was put under unnatural relations. The
Mm.
folklore motif index number is right next to the one for bestiality, so that's
Ah.
charming. And the the collectors themselves, if the collector is sort of nice and proper, that might change which stories he's willing to record.
Mm.
And if the original teller knows that, some uptight guy is coming from the city, they're going to tell them the ones that he can hear.
Mm.
And so there was a whole lot lost through that narrow passage.
Yeah.
But not everything. There's
Mm.
stuff out there. Yeah,
Yeah. And it's really exciting that people like you are working on, and Em are working on queer stories, because, yeah, yeah, they were always there,
always
so
there. Yeah,
always there,
yeah, yeah.
which is
And
great.
going back
Yeah.
to where do I tell? There's a few places that there's a shop that I work with that has a performance space here in town called Curiosa. It's an amazing place. I've told at the Toronto International Storytelling Festival, the Niagara Irish Festival. I was even invited out to an Irish language weekend where I told for an afternoon. I did a double set. So I told 90 minutes and then I took 10 minutes and then I told 90 more minutes.
Wow.
That
Wow.
was a lot. But there's a lot of good venues. And one of my favorites here in Toronto, if any of your listeners are headed this way, is there's an open mic called 1001 Friday Nights of Storytelling. And it started in 1978.
What?
And it has gone every Friday, whether that Friday was Christmas or New Year. They found a venue for every Friday, and then when COVID hit, they were ready to move online really quickly. So they didn't even skip a beat there. They've literally not missed a Friday since 1978. So that's like 3,000 and something Fridays at this point.
Wow.
And it's perhaps the oldest ongoing weekly storytelling event in the world.
Wow, that's really exciting. Well, just
Yeah,
want to
it's
come to
amazing.
Canada now and see all the good things that
Please
there
do,
are to
yes.
see. Lots of great things to see. Well, this podcast is called The Heart of Storytelling. What do you think is at the heart of storytelling, and why do we need it today?
Ah, that's a fantastic question. I think that the answer to part of it might be sort of flipping the question upside down. What is storytelling the heart of? And I think that storytelling is the heart of humanity itself. And then to go back to the original question, the heart of storytelling might actually be fire. I think that we used to think that fire had been with us for 300,000 years, and now new evidence shows that it goes back more than 1 million years. Humans have had fire. So before we were people. And I think that all the other primates, they're awake when there's some light, and then at night they're most of them are asleep and dreaming. But fire gave us a space where, first of all, just by cooking, it let us sort of shrink our gut and grow our brain. And so we had a lot more resources on that front. And it gave us this strange time that no other animal has, where you're not busy with the activities of life and you're not sleeping. And so with those big brains that fire gave us, we had a focus. We had to feed the fire. We had to sit around the fire. And it gave us the opportunity to be still and then make language. And language and story came up together. It's not like we made a technology and then we used it. They rose together around the fire, I think. And there are other people who think that too. And so as we grew and changed, like there are other animals that have music, there are other animals that have culture and that they teach their offspring things. Not all of it's born in. Like there is nothing special about us, especially when you look at other monkeys, except our capacity to tell stories. And I think that grew us in a very different way. And so humanity, storytelling, fire, all three of those things rose up together. And we find that as in the centrality of fire to all of our religious rituals. I mean, there's whether it's a bonfire night all the way through to the lighting of lights and candles for saints and whatever it may be. There's those pieces, but also going back to the Irish stories, Dagda, whose name means the good God, he has other great names like da Brat, which is fire of the brow, or Ruad Rafessa, red God of perfect knowledge. Um, and so with him, we see this fiery knowledge. And A is like the Indian Agni, who's the central fire god of the ritual, or the Latin ignite, like so all of our ignition words, like so that word. But you have this fire god who's associated with knowledge and with lore. But his daughter, Bridget, she's the fire of poetry, the fire of smithcraft, the fire of healing. So that's the inner fire of the body, and that fire of inspiration, the fire in the water, the light in the deep, that sort of thing. That she holds all of those things because she's, her father's daughter, but she's taken it in her own direction and sort of evolved it from a more primal to a more I mean, not that he's not civilized, but she's next level. And so we find even in our stories this centrality of fire as a source of inspiration and knowledge. So I think fire is the answer to the first part of that. And why does it matter today? That's a big one. I think that we're losing touch with tradition. We're losing touch with elements of our past, and our past is not perfect, but we need to remember the good things and the bad things so that we can perpetuate some of it and have the rest as an object lesson or a warning. Some of my favorite stories, most of the Cuchulainn stories, all the Red Branch Ulster cycle, it's a disaster. It's so it's all object lesson, right? But we need those stories. And I think that there's something about being able to pass on a story,
Mm.
to be a link in the chain. You can't do that with personal stories. If I
Mm.
tell you a personal story, you can't turn around and tell it. It would
Mm.
be strange, right?
Yeah.
If I tell you a folk tale or a fairy tale or like that belongs, like I'm just a link in the chain.
Mm.
And so those are the stories that I think we need, the wisdom that they offer. And even if culture has changed and we disagree, like that's good too.
Mm.
But I don't like changing stories too much.
Mm.
I might change style, but not content.
Mm.
Uh, so I don't need
Mm.
to flip it. I don't need to make the good guy the bad guy or vice versa. Um, yeah, that might be a whole other tangent.
No, but
But
it's
I do
still,
think,
it's a lot to think about, because what we do, we just do it, a lot of us just do it because we love it. And we love that moment that you have in a story when you're telling and the story is there. And, we love that moment, but there's a reason why we love that moment because there's something deeper in it for all of us. And I think that's really, really important.
yeah, yeah. And in storytelling, like with music, they've done sort of brain scans and things. People get entrained together
Mm.
with the speaker and with other listeners. There's a kind of deep connection, a kind of light trance,
Mm.
not the kind of trance that takes away your will, but you're swept up in something bigger than yourself.
Mm.
And and to be a storyteller is to be hopefully a responsible steward to that power.
Mm.
And I think that's wonderful.
It is, it really is. So have you got some really memorable moments or like special moments in storytelling that you'd like to share?
Hmm. Yes. Uh, a few years ago, actually, this was back when I just started. So it was maybe 2012, 2013. I was telling the same story I told today. I was telling the birth of Lou, and I was telling it to a classroom. this is before I decided that really my tellings were aimed at I say 13 plus on the website, and that's probably true. Um, if it's older than that, it's not because the kids can't handle it, it's because the parents are shocked. The kids are fine. But yeah, I was telling to a junior high class, and there were two girls who were sitting sort of closer to me. The desks were all in a circle, and they were close to my right. And when the children, when the babies went into the deep, dark, cold Atlantic, they visibly gasped. And so I knew that they were like so with me in the story that part of me had to keep telling, and there was another part of me that was like, oh, my heart.
Oh.
I thought that was wonderful. Yeah. And yeah, there are other times where the feedback I get um, afterwards, there'll be somebody who's pulled a completely different theme from the story than
Mm,
I have because of how it resonated with their life.
mm,
And um, some of them, you know, it's not about whether I agree with them or not at all. They're sharing something intimate, and so I receive it as that. And uh, sometimes the insights are from like somebody whose life is so different from mine that I couldn't get there from here. And so
mm,
it's a real kindness for them to say, "Oh, this is what I heard here,"
mm,
or I found this part really difficult.
mm,
And then we affirm. Like I would never change a story because it's difficult,
mm,
but I'm quite happy to say, yeah, that is a hard part. Do you want to debrief that if I have time? If I don't, then I try and remind them to breathe and all
mm,
that good stuff.
yeah.
Um, yeah, there are a lot of little moments that
Mm,
don't come up as stories for themselves, but uh, there was one time I was telling the story of Telcha, Lou's foster mother. So she's the great land, and it was an August telling, and I get to the part of the story where her heart breaks in her chest because she's creating agriculture, she's clearing the land, and there's such an existential cost um, for us to even eat, right? So
mm,
agriculture, all of that. Um, and there was a line in the way I was telling it that I said, "And with her we grieve." And there had been dark clouds coming in from the north um, for the entire sort of space of this telling. And when I got to "with her we grieve," the sky just opened and water came down like a torrential downpour.
wow.
And so there were
Wow.
about 50 people standing in a big circle, and some of them had drums, so they needed to grab their drums and run. And others started to run, and they ran like 10 feet or 5 feet, and they realized that they weren't going to get any wetter. It was a hot August rain, so they just turned around and returned to the circle, and we finished the telling.
Wow.
And there was a moment where it just took my breath away. Like that is
Mm,
not the synchronicity of that was such a blessing that it kind of blew my mind a little bit to be. And
yeah.
again, that we're just part of something bigger, right?
Yeah.
So
Well,
that
it is.
moment of
It's the
appreciation.
landscape and the world within it as well. I mean, the when you look at the myths and the Irish myths, I've only just done a little bit of work on them, but it's a whole pantheon of characters, isn't it? You've got to know all the characters, and you've got to know where they fit with each other. It's quite a lot. It's quite a lot to do myth, I think. It's a
Oh
lot of
yeah.
yeah, a lot of research and a lot of time engaging with all of the characters and where they fit, and if they've got multiple names and all of those things. It's really tricky.
Yeah. And each of those names tell us something important about them.
Mm,
And so it's quite wonderful. Yeah, I love the Irish myths for that. It's not my thing, but the Greek myths also have that kind of depth. And
mm,
even if we don't include it in our story, yet knowing the background, I think adds a richness to even just how we say the names or
mm,
like knowing that these people have this is an easy relationship, this is a hard relationship, and being
mm,
able to all of the subtleties that go with that. Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, that is. So do you have any advice for other tellers who might want to do performance or work in Irish or in do what you do poetry within your stories and
I think for me, and I'm not sure if this advice would carry to everybody, but learn a bit of the language.
mm,
Um, when I tell, and now even when I'm telling to Irish speakers, I got the highest compliment this October. Someone said, I said, well, how was the Irish? He said, I understood every word. I'm like, okay, great. Uh, Last year, somebody said it's lovely to hear Irish in your Canadian accent. And at first there was a moment where I was taken aback, and then he followed it up with, the for the language to live, it has to live on more than just one island. And
yes.
I'm like, oh my, so that was a wonderful kindness. So yeah, know the language, even if only to pronounce the names in a good
Mm,
way.
mm,
Um, that can be helpful, and that can be a lifelong process. You don't need to be an
mm,
expert, just the beginnings to start. Really spend time with the poems, sort of feel through what the stories are, because the stories as found in the manuscript, some of them are terrible. There's too much description at the front. They throw away the climax. Like as a literary tradition, I'm not always thrilled with Irish myth. But so you have to read it and then translate it back into a living word, something that is on like in your mouth. Um, and then and so finding your own voice is so important. So to have a voice that has my own authenticity, but to hold the story's authenticity. And so I don't need to change the story, but I can tell it playfully, I can tell it seriously, I can tell it in a grand epic style, or I can tell
mm,
it casually. Those are all fair game, but
mm,
don't mess with the content. Like, don't mess with the plot points. For
mm,
me, that's very important. Other people will give exactly the opposite advice.
mm,
Um, and we all have our way in the world. Um, but yeah, just dive in and
mm,
listen to other tellers is the biggest thing. I've learned so much from hearing other tellers and seeing what feels good to me or what doesn't feel good to me. Start practicing early, find people to hear it. Because this isn't an art that goes from the page to out loud,
mm,
right? Like it's an oral tradition, and even if I've got some scratch notes, yeah, think of it as an oral tradition. I have sometimes, like, if you hear somebody tell a literary tale, even if
mm,
they're really good, you can still hear the page,
mm,
right? Like there's a way that especially modern literature, it was written in silence to be read in silence, and it shows.
mm,
As opposed to it was written to be read out loud, or better yet, it was told to be retold.
mm.
And so, how do we, even if we are pulling a story from a book, how do we make sure that we're telling it to be told?
Mm.
I think
I,
that
I think
that's
for
that's
I think for that it's the landscape. It's the place that you put the story is really for me, it's the landscape that really helps ground it in between the lines,
yeah,
I think that yeah, that's for me is really important.
yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. That's wonderful advice. And you've been absolutely fantastic. Thank you for joining me on the podcast. Where can people find you if they want to find out more about you and your work?
Wonderful. Thanks for asking. My website is www.brianwalsh.ca.
Mhm.
And so I bill myself there as Do Scéalaí Ceanadach le Scéalta Éireannacha, which is your Canadian teller of Irish tales. And I'm on Instagram at the same name, Brian Walsh, all one word, .ca. So I can be found, yeah, my own website and Instagram are the two easiest places. And Instagram, I try and keep it fairly up to date, though often when I'm preparing for a performance, the one thing I forget is to ask someone to take a picture. So sometimes I have them and sometimes I don't. When I do, I get them entered in.
Marketing. Always remember the
Right?
marketing.
That's a whole other skill set. That's
Isn't it just? Oh, thank you again. Thanks so much.
Oh, thank you for having me. I've really appreciated talking with you.
Well, that's our episode for today. I hope you've enjoyed learning about storytelling and folktale, fairytale, myth, legend, or personal tales, wonder tales, all sorts of stories, and the art of storytelling and why we really need to continue using it today. You can find more information about me at alissacurtain.com or at Alyssa Curtain Stories on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube and TikTok. I hope that you can find your heart in storytelling.